for Double Portions here, and I am here to tell you the story behind adding bechamel sauce to lasagna. I have been a lasagna connoisseur all my life. When I did trips to Germany, I basically ate lasagna every place I went because I got full of Spätzle, and you can only have Spätzle so many meals, but I can have lasagna every meal. As a child, I loved Stouffer's lasagna. I mean, it's the only thing I knew how to cook in college, so throw the whole pan in and I'd get at least 2 meals out of that big family-sized pan. And then all growing up, lasagna is truly my favorite meal, and my portion size was about half the pan and a full loaf of bread. So as I've now hit my 50 cumpleaños, 50th birthday, I have to scale that back. And now when they give me a portion that's about yay big, I kind of go, all right, that'll be enough. So the story behind the bechamel sauce is we were in New Zealand, and we were, we got there late at night, and we went and stayed at this hotel in Paella at the Bishop Selwyn Hotel. And it was late, we were tired, and I was starving, imagine that. And I said, where can we get something to eat around here that's still open? And they directed us across the street to this pizza joint, and I said, great. So we go upstairs, and it wasn't just a pizza joint, it was an Italian restaurant. And so I asked the lady, I go, how's the lasagna? And I got the Italian mama look, which was, dare you ask me about my lasagna? So we picked up a piece of lasagna, went back to the room, took a bite of it, and it was, oh, heavenly lasagna. And that was it. I didn't know the name of the restaurant, and we moved on from the area the next day, but I remembered that lasagna. And so I tried to find that layer of cheese. It was this white creamy cheese that was in this lasagna, and I tried to find it for years afterward and never could find whatever this white cheese was. So years later, probably at least 10 to 12 years later, I was in Australia at the, where was I at? The Sydney airport. And I was cruising through the airport, and at one of the little food courts, I grabbed a piece of lasagna. And I sat down to take a bite, and there it was. That white creamy cheese thing was in that lasagna. And I go, there it is, here it is, it's right here, whatever this is. So we went back to the counter where we bought the lasagna, and we tried to speak to them, language barrier. But anyways, we got them to bring the chef out, and the chef came out, and he told us what this layer of cheesy white stuff was, and he goes, bechamel sauce. And he was speaking Italian, and I was like, okay, what? And he's like, bechamel sauce. And I'm like, okay, I'm not getting it. And I had Sinful Cindy come along, and so Sinful Cindy goes, all right, write it down. So he wrote it down. To our surprise, it was bechamel sauce. Head slap. It wasn't cheese, it was bechamel sauce. We've done our homework and now realize that it's served in northern Italy, not as much in southern Italy. And so I have a batch right here ready to go in my lasagna, and I'm so thrilled and happy. And we just got back from a trip to Italy, and it's confirmed. All of the lasagna that I had in northern Italy had the bechamel sauce in it. I loved it. And then as we got further south, they did not have the bechamel sauce in it. Still good, but nothing like having the bechamel sauce in it. So give it a shot, and love your lasagna.
Hello and welcome to the Simply Simple Kitchen. Today we're showing you how to make bechamel sauce or white sauce. As you know, we just got back from our tour of Italy, and this is Taste of Italy month at Simply Simple. And one of the fabulous ingredients in our next up recipe that's coming out soon is bechamel sauce. That's the ingredient in the green pesto, authentic pesto lasagna that we'll be cooking up in a few days. So I'm going to show you how to make bechamel sauce. It's really actually fairly easy. We start with a roux, and what a roux is it's fat and flour mixed together, and then you add liquid to it. So right here I have about 3 tablespoons of butter in my pan, and I'm bringing that up to a boil. And as that gets nice and melty and sizzly, I'm going to add to that about an equal amount of flour. Sometimes I add a little more, sometimes I add a little less, and I'm going to do it actually fairly slowly. Add a little bit at a time, and if you'll see, I'm now going to stir and get all the lumps out of that flour and make sure that this roux is nice and smooth. You don't want lumps in your roux. Now, this roux is fairly loose, and so I'm gonna add just a little bit more flour to it. You can see how wet it is. I'm gonna add just a little bit more flour. The more flour you add to your roux, the thicker your sauce is going to be. And again, I'm gonna add it in small doses so that I don't get too thick. If you get it too thick, it will get super clumpy on you, and that doesn't mean that you can't work with it. It just means it's a little more challenging. If it gets clumpy on you when you start to add your liquid, in this case milk, you're gonna have to beat out the little lumps a little better, and sometimes a whisk works really well for that. But right now, we're doing pretty well with this roux. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit more. I would say I've got about 3 tablespoons of butter in here and maybe 4 tablespoons of flour. And you'll see it's getting nice and bubbly. Now, the trick to a great roux is not to add your milk or your liquid too soon. You want this roux to actually cook, so I'm gonna set this on my burner and I'm just gonna let this cook up. I'm gonna keep stirring it because if you don't stir it constantly, it could burn. You don't want it to burn, but you do want the flour to cook. That's going to be what's going to make it so that you can avoid that overly floury, sort of raw taste in your roux. Got that going there. Cook that up a little more. I've got my heat up relatively high. It's probably medium high, I would say. I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit higher. The roux is all about thickening. Let that bubble and ooh, I can smell it. It's kind of an interesting smell. A roux is done right before it starts to smell burnt, if you can imagine that. And again, I've got a pretty good nose, so I do a lot of things by smell. And right now that just smells yummy and buttery and tasty. So now, the other trick to a roux is to not scorch your milk. So again, I have my heat up pretty high, so I'm actually gonna lower my heat, or you could take your pan off of the heat if that's what you choose to do. I'm gonna add about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of milk. I'm gonna start with about 1.5 cups, and you did hear a little bit of sizzle there, that's okay. I'm gonna add 1.5 cups, about 1.5 cups, and then if it doesn't thicken, if it thickens too much, I'm probably gonna add another 1/2 cup. You get to decide how thick or thin you want your white sauce or your bechamel sauce. I'm going to want this one pretty thick because we're going to be putting it on that pesto lasagna. And I'd like to encourage y'all to go out to the Cinfully Simple website, www.cinfullysimple.com, and check out some of our Taste of Italy recipes. And now I'm gonna raise my temperature again, and I'm just gonna let this milk sort of come to a boil. Again, I'm gonna be stirring it fairly constantly because you don't want it to burn on the bottom. Move that little flour bag out of the way. I am now going to add some salt to my bechamel sauce. And that's a pretty good portion of salt because otherwise it'll taste a little too plain. Nice thing about bechamel sauce is that it's very versatile. You could add cheese to it to make a cheese sauce or a cheese fondue. You could add sausage to it to turn it into a little sausage gravy. You could add a little bit of nutmeg to it like they do in Greece when they make moussaka, which is basically Greek lasagna. And we're just gonna keep this going. And I'm doing a great job of spilling it all over the countertop here. Let me move my milk jug out of the way. And as you can see, it's still pretty thin. So it really does need to come to this boil in order to get to a consistency that's nice and thick. So I am gonna stop stirring it for a moment just so I can see when it begins to boil. It smells divine. It smells like buttery things. Can't go wrong with beer, butter, batter, or bacon. And for those of you who've been watching our YouTube videos from Italy, nothing like a good hot flash in the kitchen, like I'm having right now. Menopausal girl just loves those hot flashes. Alrighty, it's gonna take a little while to bring this up to temperature because that milk was pretty cold. There are chefs who recommend that if you're just learning how to do bechamel sauce, that you actually warm your milk so that when you add it to the pan, you don't have a chance of scorching it. And so you could certainly try that if you wanted to. You could warm it in a separate pan on the stove. And again, you don't wanna bring it to too much of a boil. You just want to get it just warm, just to where the steam is coming off of it. You could also do that in the microwave. If you had a microwavable pitcher, you could just stick your 1.5 cups, 2 cups of milk in the microwave for about a minute. And remember, bechamel sauce is going to be one of those play with your food kinds of things. This is a fairly good sized batch because we need quite a bit for our authentic pesto lasagna. And you could always start with a smaller amount of butter and a smaller amount of flour. Remember, it's usually equal parts, and the amount of milk that you put in determines how thick your sauce is. And I will point out that I am using skim milk, so we are cutting a little bit of the fat off of that recipe, even though we are using the butter there. So, ooh, look, we're starting to get thick here. Takes a little bit of time and some patience, but not too long. It's probably maybe 10 minutes from start to finish. You can just see it starting to get thick here. And we're just gonna let this start to bubble and work its way up. It just smells so good. This is Dr. DP's favorite thing to put into lasagna. It's what makes the best lasagna in the whole wide world, whether it's green pesto lasagna or whether it's your standard old red sauce lasagna. This bechamel sauce will make you famous amongst your friends and family members. Bechamel is one of those things that's used most often in northern Italy, not so much in the south. And ooh, take a look at this boiling up here. Ooh, I'm even gonna turn my heat down just a little. Ooh, look at that. Look at that beautiful pot of bechamel sauce. Ooh. And I'm gonna let it go a little bit longer, and then believe it or not, it will also thicken upon standing. You could refrigerate it if you wanted to. If you do, it might get a little film on it. That's okay. You can always just stir that film back in after you warm it up again. And, or I have heard people say that they just add a little bit of milk to the top of it, and that also keeps it from getting a film on it. But you can see, look at how beautiful and thick this has gotten. Woo-hoo-hoo. This is gonna be some good lasagna, Dr. DP. And there you have it. Bechamel sauce, AKA white sauce, used by Northern Italians everywhere.